Hello everyone, my name is Bettina Felten. About me, my background is originally environmental planning, then I did a master's degree in remote sensing and GIS, and now I've been working as a Python developer in remote sensing and GIS at IABG Geodata Factory for over 3 years. I was involved in the first stages of the MaiL project when we defined the term marginal lands within the scope of the project. And I'm excited to tell you more about that in the following presentation. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I will now present section 2.2 of the Massive Open Online course. The topic of this section is definition of marginal land within the scope of the project. I will start with a brief semantic definition of the term marginal land. The word marginal, in its literal sense, describes an entity at the margin, border or edge of something. This means that marginality is always relative, which is important to keep in mind. Land in geography and remote sensing is usually looked at as either land cover, the observed biophysical cover of the Earth's surface, or land use, which is how humans exploit the land cover. So how do we define the term marginal land in a scientific way within the scope of the project? We started by doing a systematic literature review using the Google Scholar database. In order to make the results as objective and reproducible as possible, we used a fixed set of search terms which are listed here. In the following slides, I will sum up the results of this review. The earliest mentions of the term arose in the 19th century. Those authors focused on an economic point of view. They saw land as marginal, where agricultural production revenue was equal to or lower than production costs. The main defining factors for marginality were environmental constraints, such as poor soil, climate, or accessibility of the lands. The picture shows mountainous pastures in southern Germany as a typical example of such lands. More modern authors also take other driving forces for marginality into account. While factors such as accessibility and slope are still important, fertilizers and modern farm equipment have reduced the importance of soil quality. The other side of the economic equation, which is product pricing, obviously plays a role as well. Both sides can be influenced by socio-cultural factors such as taxation, subsidies, and land abandonment. However, we now also have a different view on productivity. It's no longer only about agricultural revenue, but also different benefits derived from the land that are summarized by the concept of ecosystem services, such as carbon storage, biodiversity, recreation, etc. Those driving forces can be divided into hard and soft constraints. Hard constraints are binary exclusion factors. For example, land that's currently in use cannot fall under the definition of marginal lands within our project, even if it meets all requirements of the theoretical definition. Soft constraints are the driving forces with a variable threshold, for example, elevation or slope. This table is a summary of the different driving forces of marginality found in literature. We can see that most authors focused on environmental constraints in combination with land cover or land use. As we discussed the relativity of marginality and the prevalence of soft constraints, it follows that the definition of marginal lands is not set in stone. It is important to always view marginal lands in context. As visualized in the graphic, marginal lands can become more or less productive and therefore no longer be regarded as marginal. This is what we see on the temporal scale, meaning that all marginal lands were at one point either productive or unproductive lands. On a spatial scale, it is also important to note the relativity of marginality, especially at the European scale. Lands that are viewed as marginal in Central Europe might be viewed as productive in Southern Europe. So again, it is important to remember that marginality can only be defined within a certain context. Within the project, a decision was made to focus on semi-mountainous and mountainous marginal land. The main reason for this is that it is very unlikely for those areas to be restored for food production. Additionally, semi-mountainous and mountainous agricultural lands are particularly prone to abandonment. However, extensively used mountain areas are very important for biodiversity and local cultural heritage, so that reforestation for carbon storage is not always possible. To sum up, we define marginal land as areas with environmental and/or socio-economic constraints in semi-mountainous areas, excluding agricultural and protected areas. Examples of marginal lands according to the definition include lands with naturally low productivity, degraded or abandoned agricultural or industrial lands, and extensively used grasslands. It is important to remember that a definition based on biophysical and economic factors alone is not complete, and that marginal lands can have important functions and may not be available for carbon storage. These are the references used in this presentation, and thank you for your attention.